Okay, well, hello everybody and happy Friday. Today is another episode of Tea Time with Rachel. I absolutely cannot believe that part of my work has become this amazing opportunity to just talk with constituents, talk with people who have important things to share, and have these important conversations through this virtual reality so that we can all connect. So today I'm just incredibly honored to welcome Carla and Jeannie from the Little Red Dress team. I am just so happy to have you and thank you both so much for taking the time to have this conversation today.
Thanks for having us.
So this is the first time that I've had more than one person that I'm interviewing. So I want to thank both of you for being here and testing this out with me. And so how this is going to do is I'm going to introduce you both and then I'm going to ask you a few questions. And I also want to, first of all, start by saying I'm going to do my best to say these names in other languages, and I'm going to probably mess it up, but this is an opportunity. And I think this is really important to say because one of the things I remember years ago in my last job, I remember here in Campbell River, the Campbell River Nation opened up their doors and said, come and check out the big house, just come check it out. And I remember a lot of non-Indigenous people coming to me and saying, I'm really nervous. Like, what do I do when I get in there? What if I mess up? And I remember saying, it's okay, because when you go in the first time, it's like you're a kid and they will give you a lot of room to learn. And so I encourage people to always try to say the names and participate because that's how you learn. So I will embarrass myself. You will both correct me and we will learn together. So thank you for that as well. So Carla, I'm going to introduce you first. Carla is from the Musgamagw Dzawada'enuxw and Nisga'a Nation. Did I say it right?
Dzawada'enuxw.
Dzawada'enuxw. That's the D, Dzawada'enuxw. Can you say your traditional name for us so that we can learn it?
Maxmuwidzumga.
Maxmuwidzumga. Close.
Maxmuwidzumga.
Ga. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I know my husband Darren always says if you don't have a in the sound, you're saying it wrong. So I'll practice that. That is your traditional name, and it was bestowed upon her, and it roughly translates to leaves a part of herself wherever she goes, her essence. From the Kwak'wala language. She was raised immersed in the richness of the Kwak'wala language, culture, and values and traditions. She lives on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox and Pentlutch tribes and is a Kwak'wala instructor at North Island College. In your spare time, you also do the Red Dress campaign. That's amazing. Jeannie comes from a diverse ancestry of Anishinaabe, Cree, Scottish, and Irish bloodlines. Her Anishinaabe name is Aabawasige. Say it for me if I said it wrong.
Aabawasige.
Thank you, Wasaji. And that translates to one who shines warmly upon the people. She lives on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation and is an Indigenous curriculum support teacher in the local school district. Beading has been a passion for Jeannie and obviously for Carla. And Jeannie in particular was taught by her grandmother at a young age, and it has been something that she has enjoyed and fostered throughout her life. And I feel like I have to do this disclosure, but Jeannie's also my cousin. We're related, and I'm just really happy to have a cousin on today. I think that's so cool. So my first question to the both of you is, we all know that on Monday, June the 24th or 21st, it is Canada's Indigenous Peoples Day, a really important day in Canada. I'm just wondering, when we look at that context, could you tell our audience a little bit about what the red dress means? I think people are seeing them in a lot more places than maybe they have before. And I just want one of you to tell us, what does that mean?
Absolutely. I think now more than ever, especially with what's going on and unveiling truths that we have in this country, it's really important for us to understand what these symbols stand for Indigenous peoples, for non-Indigenous peoples. So just a little bit of history on the red dress itself. There was a Métis artist named Jamie Black, and she started the Red Dress Project back in, I think it was 2009 or 2010. And it was a visual representation of all of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. And that is just a You know, I want to say that a small representation of the larger issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, because the visual representation doesn't amount to the numbers of women who are still missing or who have been murdered. And now more than ever, with the revealing of the truths of the mass graves as well, thinking about those children that were there, that these red dresses also symbolize them as well, the young girls. And so the red dress itself, Jamie Black had started the project and it spread from there, and she had installs all across Canada, and it's now become a national symbol of the bloodlines of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And it's also an eye-catching symbol. I'm very proud when I'm driving down the highway to see all the red dresses hanging up in the trees and on fences and in people's home fronts and businesses when we drive up and down Vancouver Island, because it means that people are having conversations. And that's really important. It's sad to see those symbols because we know what they represent, but also it's a talking piece. And so originally the project has started with Jamie Black, and then we're very fortunate that in the Comox Valley here, we have the Kumagway Cultural Society. And for 4 years, they hosted a red dress display in the 4 different municipalities of Comox First Nation and in Cumberland, Courtenay, and in Comox. And that was a project that they took on for 4 years to hang the red dresses and to spark those conversations. And then from there, our project stemmed. So that's just a small blip of history of the red dress.
It's such a small blip, but such an important one. And I agree, seeing them is important. And, you know, one of the realities is it makes people see what has so long been invisible.
Mm-hmm.
I think every time you see a red dress, it reminds you that across this country, we have a history where women and girls, Indigenous women and girls, have been murdered, have just disappeared, and we still don't know. And it's hard when you hear those stories from people who are still looking for their parent, for their mother, for their sister. So it's good in a way that we're just constantly reminded. So now the two of you decided that you wanted to help and that you would use your amazing beading skills to do that. Can you just tell us a bit about what products you make and how you market them?
Yeah, so we currently we sell, and well, we bead, we do a few different things. So firstly, we bead little red dress pins, and then we also bead little red dress earrings. And
which I'm wearing a pair of today.
and we sell those on our website. However, we have an unconventional approach to selling those. We only open for orders once every few months, and we only open for a 24-hour period because we learned very quickly that we had to control, to meet the demand, we had to limit ourselves. Otherwise, we would just be working nonstop and, well, volunteering nonstop. So, but with the, in light of COVID, and just prior to COVID, we actually had received a gift of our logo. And so we turned those into enamel pins recently, and also some face masks. And then we, yeah, so we sell a variety of products, and we're actually expanding that product line to include some card decals and stickers. So
That's amazing. And I think it's so important that you said you're volunteering your time. I hope everybody heard that. And that is the important part. The next part is, what do you do with the funds that you make from these products?
we put all the funds into placing billboard ads. So they're either digital board ads in various locations on the island and or the lower mainland, but we also run static board ads when possible. And recently we soft launched a program called the Emergency Response Fund. So basically we reach out to families on the island or families who have loved ones that are initially from the island and they have a loved one missing. So we'll reach out to them personally and offer our support, whatever that looks like, whatever they need, whether they need funds to feed the search team, whether they need funds to run digital board ads, whether they need like printing and copying, we'll just send them some money to do that. So that's basically what we do with the funds.
Well, thank you for that. And, I've spoken about your program several times, both in the House of Commons and in committee, because I just really admire what you're doing. But I will admit that I also get really frustrated with the responses that I receive, especially from the minister. When it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women, the reality is there was an inquiry that was done. It was not very perfect, but it's there. And there are 291 calls to action. And Canada is still has that report and they've put some money for it, but the actions are not happening. And so, I've said to the minister, and she always praises the work that you do, Carolyn Bennett. She's like, oh, that's fantastic. But to me, the point is your funds are putting up billboards to try to find missing Indigenous women and girls. And this is sacred work. But I also believe that finding these women, stopping the murder of Indigenous women and girls should be funded by the federal government, because you guys are put in a position where you have limited resources and you can't serve the need, but you're trying. And again, it's this part where this is something that's happening. It's part of a historical genocide in our country. And the federal government's going, well, that's good that people are volunteering their time to make a difference on something that we should be standing up for as a government and as all Canadians. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
I love the fact that you say sacred work, but I have to be reminded of the fact that it's human work. What we're doing is using our hearts, speaking from our hearts. And I believe any person across this country, if their loved one was missing, they would be doing everything they could to find them. And that's why it's so heartbreaking. This is hard work. This is sacred work, but it's human work. It's a human right to know what happened to your loved one, or to know that people are advocating for them, or actually are even thinking about them. After the inquiry came out, what solutions came after that inquiry? Like where do we go from there? How do we change our policies? How are we teaching this in the education system? How are we bringing the subject to the greater public so that it's not just another report that people don't know what it's about, that doesn't get read on a regular basis? I absolutely love and applaud you for bringing it up and bringing it into the forefront. And for me, though, I think about, being in the House of Commons or being in Parliament, and how long your term is, or how long a person's term is, and how long somebody can be advocating for something like this, for people to actually open their eyes and want to find these women, find the answers. And until we use our words, and you're using your voice, and you're using your voice to reach a greater public, but unfortunately it has to keep on going. We are using our voice and what we can with the funds that we're raising. You're using your voice, and sometimes it falls on deaf ears, and that's okay. That happens, but we have to keep on pushing and keep on voicing and bringing it into the education system and bringing it to the greater public, because the amount of people who have come up to us and said, we had no idea. And that's heartbreaking, because it's in our lives all the time. So for me, thinking about, the calls to action, and for me thinking about the inquiry, it's frustrating at times, because I feel like sometimes there's not enough traction, but at the same time, if we can keep on using our voices and pushing and making this more visible and advocating and backing up people like you do for us in this project, that's important work. So.
Well, thank you for that. And I appreciate the work and how many people are coming together. And it does make me feel somewhat hopeful to hear that you have to sort of limit your times of selling because the demand is so high. And I appreciate that, because it does show that interest and that concern. And I know for our office in the last few weeks, many non-Indigenous Canadians have been calling us to share their shock and horror at the finding of the 215 children buried in unmarked graves right outside Kamloops Residential School. And now, of course, we know that the bodies of other children are being found across Canada. And it's you know, I think it's hard in a way. I think you talked about it really well, Jeannie. Just this is everyday reality. How many families have heard the stories like about, their loved ones who were in residential school who say this kid went missing, we never saw them again, or I saw this kid really sick and then I didn't see them again. And I think, Murray Sinclair has been really powerful in saying when we were doing the Truth and Reconciliation, what he didn't expect was to hear as many stories as he heard of survivors saying, we saw this person killed, this child, and then we didn't see them again. So he asked for resources. He asked for resources to do more study so that could be part of the report. And he said, even in committee to us, that there is information in our report that says here's where some places might be that bodies could be found. And even if Canada would look for that right now, the testimony is right there. It would show a serious step in the right direction. And recently, Leah Gazan from our party called on the government to name this history and what is currently happening as a genocide, and that it meets, of course, the international standards of a genocide. And because I believe that is absolutely what it is. I'm just wondering, with all of this coming out, has anything changed for you in the work that you do in this context?
I think that we as a project and a team we're not untouched like the rest of the country. Our collective grief is insurmountable. And I think that there's a lot of people waking up to realize that, or to wonder how this happened. But I think the real question should be, why is this continuing to happen? This is not something that happened 25 years ago. Sure, the last residential school 25 years ago, that closed 25 years ago. And I'm constantly reminded that because that was the year my daughter was born. And so those things like ring true to my ear that like I could have been in residential school. I'm definitely a product because of my parents, my grandparents. So I think that the opportunity that we're faced with right now is for Canadians and individuals to start kind of exploring that history. And I think that we are in an opportunity to help spread that awareness. There's so many like children in care right now that are like, the number of children in care is like, I think it's like twice as high as the height of the residential school era. Like, how is that right?
I feel for where you're coming from, Carla. I think about all of the trickle-down effect of intergenerational trauma and how it still shapes our lives today, shapes our children's lives today. And that the conversations that we're having now are, again, not new to us. They're not new to our parents, our grandparents, but the reactions from our coworkers, from other family members that didn't know that history, of people that you see walking down the street and you're wearing an orange shirt, those conversations are what's changing now. And I feel that we have an opportunity to, again, affirm the things that we've been saying for years and years, but now people are more willing to listen. And it's an unfortunate situation that it takes such a tragic event for people to listen. But with this comes the opportunity to, again, push for more education, push for more funding, push for more knowledge to be shared with everybody, and it actually be valued, not just a tokenized symbol of Indigenous ways of knowing and being, or our stories of, and not being validated. So yeah, it's such a hard subject. The last couple of weeks has been incredibly hard, angering, but also hopeful for a change.
Well, I think of the stories that I've heard, like we had one non-Indigenous constituent call our office and just be devastated. Like he's an older gentleman and he was like, I didn't know. Like I knew residential school was there, but I didn't understand that this was happening. And so his commitment was to put up an orange flag in his yard until it's addressed. He's like, I just want everybody to know every day. And I'm going to go to the local community and just be like, what can I do to help? What can I do? And, you know, I heard a story from somebody who had a mother who was in her 90s, this has rocked her world because she remembers as a young mother getting a delivery and she had extra. So she called the local Indian school to see if they needed something. And they said, no, we're good. And she never thought about it again. But when she heard this story, she was like, oh my gosh, here I was, a young mother, my kids at home, and I didn't even take a moment to think about what that was down the street. And I find that really powerful. But what I find really painful is how many Indigenous people have phoned my office or called me personally and just said, like, this doesn't surprise me or shock me at all, but I feel like it's ripped my protective skin off and I can't stop crying. And I just feel for all the survivors and their loved ones who are just so overwhelmed by how people are so shocked. And I hope that, you know, non-Indigenous Canadians take some time to understand and respect that space. I just saw a post on Facebook that said, if you're Indigenous and you don't want to think about residential school today, that is okay. So, you know, maybe wait, don't always say, tell me, because again, that's the responsibility of non-Indigenous people. And there's a lot out there that you can read to learn more. You don't have to open the wounds of people who are survivors and children of survivors to learn. Your responsibility to learn is yours. So I'm sorry, I feel like I went on a rant. If there's anything you want to add, I think that's an important one though, just about how do we honor people and not approach them as non-Indigenous people. How do we approach them in a respectful way? I don't know if you have any comments on that.
I think that there's, you know, we can talk about residential school and we can talk about MMIW in terms of the highway of tears and, you know, all the precarious potentially behaviors that people like to think that the reason why we're losing women. But there's also things like forced sterilization and the increasing rates of Indigenous women in incarceration. Those are all like issues as well. They're not forefront, but they are there. Drug use, you know, just as the rest of the country. But I think that the time that we're in is a really great time for people to take it upon themselves, to educate themselves and find out the truth for themselves. Reach out, make connections. You know, I have personally myself realized and noticed there's like so many more people just smiling and saying hi, even. I'm just like, okay. Recently went to the mall and for the first time actually didn't feel like I was being watched every step that I made. Like there was like signs in Sephora and there was like a sign in another store that basically said all their proceeds were going towards the RRSS or other residential school campaigns. And I was just like, my mind was literally blown and I was almost like overwhelmed because of how much people were seeing me, but in a different way in the world. So just like stopping to take a moment and like reflecting on your own life. How have these things caused an effect, like ripple an effect in your life? And then like work from there, like take what you know and what you're passionate about, what your strengths are, and do something to change it. Like I'm sure the federal government, the provincial government has responsibilities, but we all have responsibilities as human beings. And until like we can look at our front door and see our environment and the people around us living healthily, you know, we all have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is an important time for Canada because as Canadians, this is a pivotal moment. And, you know, I've had a lot of non-Indigenous people call our office and say, this is the first time I've ever felt ashamed to be Canadian. Like I've just never had that experience. And I understand that, but how we deal with this moment, we get to decide the Canada we have in the future. This is our moment. We can make a decision to acknowledge the history. And I think what you said, Carla, was so powerful. Being seen, like the history across Canada. And I mean, I'm married to an Indigenous man, and I grew up in an Indigenous family. I remember learning about racism because I was non-Indigenous, and I kept seeing that how I was treated was different than how my family was treated. And I couldn't get it because I was a kid. But I remember starting to understand they're treating them different because they are brown and I am not brown. And it was like I was like 8 when I figured it out. And I was like, oh, so I have never been colorblind because I had to see all the time that how I was treated was different. And it really opened my eyes. So I think, you know, the being followed in stores, that is the history. But now to be looked at and seen like, oh, maybe how I've perceived Indigenous people was completely wrong. And now I have to look at them differently. I think that's a really important moment, and I hope Canadians embrace it. Thank you for that conversation. I guess, you know, we're getting close to the end. I wanted to ask you both, in the work that you are doing, what has been one of the most powerful moments, and has there been a moment that was completely unexpected?
I've got to share that as Indigenous women, you know, we are a part of a team. Although Carla and I are founders of the Lil Red Dress Project, we are supported by a team of volunteers, and we do have, you know, our husbands help with different tasks, and we have a few men who have done some beadwork for us, but the main team who goes and teaches the beadwork or does the workshops are women. And I have to giggle about 7 of us cramming into Carla's van to drive to Vancouver, and we were going over to teach in one of the school districts over there at a Pro D event. And it was the thought process wasn't lost on me about how comical it was, the laughter that we shared in just traveling together as 7 women of all different age groups and different backgrounds, and that feeling of community and that sense of belonging that we have together in traveling or doing these workshops together. And that, for me, thinking about the women that didn't have that opportunity or still don't have that opportunity, or the young girls, it wasn't lost on me that how fortunate we are to be where we are right now, the resilience of our ancestors for us to be here. And so that was one of my funny, good memories of us all cramming in. And then I got to tell you, we stopped at Michael's in Vancouver. And for beaders and crafters to stop at Michael's in Vancouver, it was a big deal. And we were trying to cram yarn and things you would not believe into every nook and cranny of that van on our way home. So that was one of my funny haha moments as being a volunteer in this group. And I loved it.
That's awesome. Carla, I'm going to give you a chance to answer that one too, if you want to.
Yeah, so I think for me, there's two moments, and I'll keep them short. So the first, I think, most powerful moment, one of the moments was for me is Jeannie and I went across with some team members over to the Nech'ahwno side of the island to conduct a workshop there for some Indigenous women that were doing their own kind of MMIWG work. And so we went over there to hold this workshop. Shilsa came and did like an article on us, and we're just like, okay, like it was like a big deal. And then at the end of the day, they wrapped us in these blankets, and like Jeannie and I just crumbled into like a bag of emotions and tears. And I was just like, what the heck? Like, just to feel so supported and loved and held up for the work that we do. I think sometimes Jeannie and I kind of take for granted the work that we do and how impactful it is. I think we just putter along and we do the work because it needs to be done. And we don't necessarily stop and think about that impact that it's had. So that was a really profound moment. But one of the moments I think that really touched me personally was we were holding a beading workshop within our own community, and there was a young girl that attended there, and she had grown up in the foster care system and then was later adopted by a white family. They did their best to like expose her to Indigenous, you know, whatever that looked like. But at some point she had made a point in her life that she just put all that behind her. She put everything associated with her life previous to where she was at, all Indigenous, everything. She just didn't want to be, you know, she had such a hard life. So she just put that all behind her. And then she showed up at our workshop and she started beading. And then she just had this like enlightened aha moment that like, I used to bead. I enjoy beading, like, and I don't know why I stopped beading. And then her and I had this conversation about like her life. And I was just blown away that this handcraft that brought us together and brought her back, reconnected her to who she was. I'm not sure where she is to this day, but like just to share that moment was such a beautiful thing.
That's wonderful. So the last question that I have for both of you is a little bit more light and fun, and just a reminder that we're all human, and it's actually a great way for me to hear some wonderful things. So I will ask you these 3 questions. The first question is, what is your favorite beverage?
Mine is clean drinking water.
Nice. Carla?
I appreciate clean drinking water.
I'm gonna ditto on the clean drinking water, but I also appreciate a good glass of like nettle tea.
Nettle tea is good. Do you have a favorite book or movie?
I love the movie Megamind. Only because my son and I have watched it over and over and over together, and yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. So
Awesome. Carla?
I don't know if I specifically have a favorite movie, but I'm gonna say Coco is right up there. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Coco, but my youngest daughter introduced me to Coco, and it was a really great movie.
Awesome. And the last question I have for both of you is, why do you love where you live?
oh man, that's an easy one. The relationship with the land. We're so fortunate to be able to plant our feet on the grass and to pick medicines and berries and do it all in peace and quiet. And we're just so lucky here.
How about you, Carla?
For me, I would definitely say, I think compared to other communities that I've lived in, I think the Comox Valley is definitely one of those places where I feel safer. I'm not going to say 100% safe, but you know, I feel safer. And I also feel like there's a growing amount of community that gets it, that is open and aware and willing to act on just anything that they're passionate about.
Yeah, it's perfect. Well, thank you both for coming. I really appreciate it today. I think the conversation was incredibly powerful, and it always goes by so fast. And I appreciate both of you taking the time. And I just want to remind everybody that Monday is National Indigenous Peoples Day. I encourage you to wear orange just in remembrance. I think this is an important day just to continue that. I know so many people have been wearing orange almost every single day just because that feels like the right thing to do as we recognize the reality of what we're all facing together as Canadians. And I thank both of you because I think this is important work, because this has been a history and a story that has been an Indigenous history and story, but it really needs to become a Canadian story and a Canadian history, and all of that needs to be acknowledged. So thank you for the work that you do to keep women and girls safe, and thank you for just continuing this really important work. And for the rest of the audience, I look forward to seeing your orange on Monday, and we will talk again at tea time next week. Bye, everyone.